just briefly want to let you know about some of the events that are coming up. We're now sort of really into the swing of it with the autumn season, so all our events are going to be run online for the next few months. And these are some of the things that we've got coming up in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And also a reminder that if you don't already connect with us on Twitter, please do at CIPD Birmingham, and please do tweet about today's event as well. So tomorrow morning, we've got an independence group meeting, how to embrace automation in marketing and still keep it human. We have then 2 of our very popular employment law updates taking place, one as a lunchtime session on the 29th of September and one a morning session on the Thursday, the 1st of October. It's the same session being repeated, being run by Squire Patton Boggs, but just to give people a choice of when to attend. And then we're running monthly Engage for Success meetings that Fiona's leading on employee engagement during and beyond the pandemic. These take place on the first Thursday of the month, so the next one is at 4 o'clock on Thursday, the 1st of October. All of these are listed on the CIPD Birmingham events page. I'm sure you have the link for that. I will send it out afterwards. Also, I haven't listed on here, but just to remind you as well, we've got the CIPD Midlands annual event taking place on Friday, the 9th of October. This is normally our one-day conference at the Forest of Arden Hotel, and we're not able, obviously, to hold it as a face-to-face event this year, so we've moved it across to the virtual format. We've got some great speakers. We've got Peter Cheese, we've got Vicky Price, the economist, we've got Liggy Webb, we've got people from Jules, speakers from Jules and West Midlands Police. So do have a look at that one as well and see if you're interested in coming along to that. And I will now hand over to Fiona, who's going to lead this session on growing your own culture.
So, hi everybody, thank you ever so much for joining us. I appreciate it's lunchtime, so if I see you nibbling away, I fully understand you've given up your lunches to come. And well, I should really have called it a sprint, I think, rather than a whistle-stop tour, because we really are going to sprint through this. And we will make it as interactive as we can. Please use chat to introduce yourselves, as we normally do, and raise any questions. So we're going to have an hour online in the workshop. And then we're going to go into half an hour Q&A, because I was conscious that not everybody would be able to stay for the hour and a half. So if you do need to sign off at past, then there'll be the questions and answers. So do put your questions up. If you want us to respond by email, then give us your email address and we'll do our best. Okay, so welcome everybody. My colleague Anne sends her apologies. However, we've got the very able and supportive Diane Rance joining us as well. So Diane, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Hello everybody. As Fiona says, I'm here to assist Fiona today. So I'll be making a note of any questions you put in the chat and feeding them into the conversation as we go along. At the moment, I'm largely working in the area of leadership and development with senior teams and individuals. And as Eleanor said, I also sit on the branch committee. I'm delighted to be supporting my colleague Fiona today.
So thanks, Diane, I really appreciate it. So Anne sends her apologies, she's had to prioritise elsewhere. So a bit about me, for those who I've not met before, I'm very much a volunteer, active volunteer in the Midlands through the CIPD and through Engage for Success. And I also sit on the steering group for Engage for Success and lead on the strategic theme for people productivity. And I don't know about you, but productivity is really sort of coming up in the agenda, especially in HR. So hopefully this will be very well timed for you. So my Change Expert was established last year, and it is a combination of all my career plus others. The other associates who are with me, Diane, Jill, contributed. And so it's an amalgamation of our experience and expertise over the years. So it has, to do it in an hour, wow. Well, let's have some fun as well while we do it, hopefully as well. Okay, so 1 hour. So before, in terms of participation, I asked you to contribute to Menti online. So I don't know how many of you here are actually people who did that, but I'm threading some of that through, and I'll also be using the material and the content to write an article as well for the next newsletter. So you will see it in some shape or form. So thank you everyone, really appreciate that. So let's have a look at, this is the framework for growth that we've developed through our years of experience. And this really creates the agenda for our time together this afternoon. I've realised through my extensive career, through Royal Mail, where I set up change management, British Gas, the clients I've worked with in all sectors over the years, that it is your people who grow your business. Now, that won't come to any surprise to the audience, but actually how many of the people in your business realize that actually it is your people who grow your business? And so this is all set on that absolute foundation of it's our people who grow our business. And what we do is we shine a light on behaviours, and we'll explore that as we go through. We provide a pragmatic approach, very sort of hands-on pragmatic. We will work in partnership with our clients as consultants. We'll work online as mentors to support your catalysts within the business. We'll also provide training and coaching, and can be particularly useful to bring somebody in from outside when you are working with your executives on culture. They always are the least likely to be wanting to be accepting behavioural change as an area for growth. So, just a bit of background. So this is my description for culture. I don't know about you, but it's really difficult to grab hold of. You can't pin it to the wall, but you can sense it. I can sense a culture when I go into an organisation, into a room, into a department. I can feel it. You get that you look around, you can see the environment. It's all there in front of you. One of the most common descriptions is it's how we do things here. Yeah. I recently heard a different definition, which I thought was fabulous. It's the worst behaviour that we accept within our business. And I thought that's quite a good, because when we're called in, it normally is pretty toxic. So yeah, the worst behaviour that's accepted in our business describes our culture. Wow, that's quite scary, isn't it? So it is defined by values, and obviously very much linked to strategy, to brand, and underpinned by behaviours that provide those expectations, and supported by process and technology. That creates your culture. It's not just the people alone. However, we're all contributing to culture. Each and every one of us have got a role in how our culture is within our organisation. And it's made up of both the conscious and the unconscious behaviours that each and every one of us bring into everything we do. And my goodness, as pivoting has been happening, boy, has there been a lot of unconscious behaviours. Some really conscious good leadership, really good. And certainly they're the ones we've been hearing through Engage for Success, that real conscious leadership where they really have understood the value of bringing the people with them. So another concept that we work on is very much everything we do in business is about what we do or how we do it. So everything we do, our actions and our tasks. Now I would suggest that the majority of businesses focus on the what. Their systems, their processes are all to support the actions, the activities. Where we can have the biggest impact, obviously, is our people, their behaviours and their attitude. So cast your mind back, if you can, to pre-COVID days. Is that a distant memory? It feels like it to me, I can assure you. Pre-COVID days, how much of your time was taken up in the issues that were arising as a result of people's behaviours, people's attitudes? It's a fair proportion of HR time. And certainly for a manager, when they've got a particular issue or problem, it can be 20% of the people taking up 80% of their time. So it can have a big impact on business bottom line. And we often find that managers aren't upskilled, they're not equipped. Leaders certainly aren't necessarily consciously aware of the impact their behaviours are having. They don't realise how they can really create that big impact. So the two difficult boxes, how I often call it, those behaviours, those unacceptable behaviours, people put them in that too difficult box. Oh, they'll go away. Well, guess what? They don't. They create a whole life of their own. And it's not until you open that box and realise just the energy that's been created by that unacceptable behaviour, because people will go to that unacceptable behaviour. It becomes their norm. So What do we mean by highly productive culture? This is our definition. And I have to say, I'm very, very energized and just reading an HBR magazine issue, journal issue in July 2020. Guess what? They're talking about growth as being the new culture. Yay. So we're ahead of the curve. And for us, it's that whole environment. It's about our leaders, our managers, creating that environment where our individuals, our teams, and the company can thrive and grow. So out of the door is that the sort of the capitalist, and in comes that whole purpose, that whole wanting to be part of the benefit of the whole organization, contributing to how your business, how your organization delivers what it needs to, what it's working on. So that's our definition, and that's where we're looking to take you on that whistle stop tour. But why productivity? So this is pre-COVID. I'm going to ask Diane to do the today, and I'm sure you can add to it, and I will be asking you too. But pre-COVID, our productivity in the UK was 30% lower than USA and 35% lower than Germany. That's a third. We are a third less productive than our competitive countries. What's that all about? And certainly when you look at the Office of National Statistics, they look at sort of widgets and nuts and bolts rather than the whole people bit. That's the people strand, the people productivity strand that I'm leading for Engaged Success. In Gallup, they've identified that growth, that development focus creates 10% higher customer ratings, 21% higher profitability, 17% higher productivity. Again, you can find that in Gallup. And prior to COVID, it is difficult to get really good data right now, but prior to COVID, only 11% of the UK workforce was engaged. Wow. 21% are actively disengaged. In other words, they've signed out, they really are just coming to work. And the remaining 68% felt no meaningful attachment to their job and company. And I know that really increased. It did increase straight after lockdown in most companies. So today, Diane, so much is happening. Over to you.
Sorry, I keep losing my internet intermittently, so apologies if I suddenly disappear. So one of the things Fiona and I have been talking about is about why this subject is even more important than usual. And not that it isn't always important, but an extra importance, because of the situation where a lot of you are either preparing to support your organisations in restructuring or making redundancies. That can be a real challenge to an organisation culture. For those who are leaving, they dilute the culture because they dilute the teamwork, the team ethos, the team dynamics. But also those who remain sometimes are left fearful for their own position, and so their sense of belonging to the organisation can be really challenged amongst those who remain. I think we also have the situation where even if you're not handling redundancies and your organisation isn't planning to restructure and make people redundant, there's some sense there that I might be at risk. This could happen to my organisation. And I think all of this can really dilute or challenge an organisation's current culture. So even if your culture at the moment is fantastically supportive of high productivity, it's potentially being challenged by all that's happening out there in terms of global uncertainty, market uncertainty, and personal uncertainty. I think also if you've got people working from home still, or you've had people working from home for a long time, then there's a potential for your culture to be diluted. Your culture isn't being reinforced 8 hours a day, as it were, by people being physically together. And those conscious and unconscious reinforcements of culture that go on when we're co-located with our colleagues. So I think the longer people are working remotely, and the longer they work remotely, whether it's for 2 days a week or whether they continue to work remotely 5 days a week, your culture is at risk of being diluted, whether it's good or whether it's a not such a good culture. So that's why focus on this subject at the moment is really, really important. So I think the relevance is not just a highly productive culture, but how do we maintain and retain the culture we've got where it's already highly productive. So for those of you who are working within your organisations, perhaps after today, take some time to think about how is our current culture being challenged by the external circumstances we find ourselves in. Back to you, Fiona.
Thanks, Diane. That's great. So we've got 5 generations in the workplace. We've got high emotions, we've got crises, and actually good decisions aren't always made in these environments. I don't know about you, but I can feel the effect. So, you know, running a business as well on top of all that can be quite, well, we know what it's like.
I think that's a really good point, Fiona, that when we're in times of high emotion, whether it's personal or in our working lives or both, as many people are at the moment, it's really hard to think long term. And it's hard to think clearly, and our culture can support that or not within the workplace. So we need to think about how we anchor people within the workplace by the culture that we provide for them.
So our question to you is on chat, just take a minute or so. Why is this important for you? This could be a team culture, it could be a department culture, it could be a whole company culture you're considering. Which one is it? But why is that important now? In amongst all the other priorities we've got, why is it important now? So some thoughts, comments, please, on chat. And we might even invite one of you to come in and just share yours. So Diane's looking at chat for me. Yeah. Thank you. So any key themes emerging, Diane?
So we've got from Alexandra that we need to combat plummeting morale. From Rhiannon about creating a positive feeling for recovery. And from Debbie, I've just lost Debbie's, hold on, I shall get it back. Has it gone? Debbie, about feeling of togetherness. So I think it's a recognition that at the moment, David's made the point, the bonuses are gone at the moment, prospects are known, it's a level of uncertainty we're living with. And yet we need to keep people feeling motivated and energized, ready for the recovery, whatever that might look like.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I did a job description for somebody joining my husband's business, and on it I put, the only limitation will be yours. The only limitation to your growth will be yours. And I just thought, wow, I wish I'd joined a business that had that as a key message based on values. So we just got to live up to it now. So framework for growth, we're actually going to start to assess the environment. And a good reason for that will become obvious at the end. So we're looking at assess the environment. What's that all about? Well, I've certainly, and I'm sure you've identified, getting the decision makers on board right at the beginning. You can't do it without it. In fact, don't do it unless you've got the key decision makers on board. That's the exec team if it's whole organizational culture change. So why is that important? Well, they don't really do that soft, pink, fluffy stuff. They really don't. And that's what it's been called to me recently, soft, pink, fluffy stuff. You know, it's not important, Fiona. They're very much in that IQ. And the emotional intelligence isn't why they're in the executive team often. So it's very, very important to think about how do I get into their decision-making world by providing that data to help that make that informed decision. And I have to say, this has been painful. This is the painful area, but actually the most rewarding as well. So I did a workshop with an executive team, and the FD, well, not one workshop, I started on a 5 behaviors journey with them. And the FD sat there and went, Fiona, there's nothing logical about this. And I went, absolutely, that's why you're all here. So having that external voice can really be of value. So thank you. This is one of the questions that you asked as participants. How does the existing culture adversely affect business performance? And I think you've just raised some of them. Trust came out as low, no surprise, and that's driving a compliant behavior. Innovation and experimentation don't happen in a company that doesn't have that growth culture. the psychological safety and coming back to work, they're not, you know, don't feel safe. Budgets and profits are dropping. The customer experience, is an awful lot of complaints management, we're just not getting the customer experience right. Negativity, that whole downward energy, the impact on productivity, cynicism, results, those are some of the words that you use. And of course, burnout is huge, especially at exec level. So how can we convince them that this is really important for them? So I'm sure most of you have at some point measured your employee engagement. And are your exec team just looking at the results, whether they go up or down? Or are they aware of that bottom line cost? Because every disengaged employee, it costs you 1/3 of their salary. So for all those reasons I've just been, all those descriptions, those behaviors I've just been sharing, that costs the business 1/3 of the salary. So let's look at that in terms, if we were, this is your feedback from responding to the statement, our leaders and managers create an environment where individuals, teams, so our definition for a highly productive culture. This is your response. So we've got, I would suggest, we've got 49% in the actively engaged, that's 7 and upwards. 49%, that's really high. I bet you a lot of business leaders would love to have a culture that's 49% actively engaged. And probably there are some. In terms of neither engaged nor disengaged, 29%. And in terms of actively disengaged, 23%. So let's work on that calculation. And this is just a very easy headline calculation you can use with your executive team, with your leaders. So what's my total salary bill? I'm not going to ask you what it is, but I'm assuming that you will have a good idea of what your total salary bill is. So actually disengaged, we've got 23%. What's 23% of your salary bill? Divide that by 1/3, gives you a roundish figure as a guesstimate, estimate you can take to the executive board based on Gallup and other research done on employee engagement.
On the questions, well, just thinking about it, Fiona, one of the things Fiona has introduced me to is Mentimeter in all its glory. And I'm just wondering how many of you are using Mentimeter or something similar to gauge how employees are feeling about being recognised or engaged or thought about or acknowledged over the last 6 months. If you have a tool that you're using that others might be able to access, could you just put it in chat to share with others? And then if people don't have a tool, whether it's Mentimeter or something else, then they can perhaps go away from today and research that with a view to doing some measurement in their own organisation.
So all the techniques that I'm using, we've been using today, that whole Mentimeter would be things we'd be using in culture change, highly productive culture. So what factors do you need to be calculating that are contributing to the cost of your existing culture? What are the indicators in your organisation you need to be costing to identify the real cost of your culture? So we've looked at the big picture. What's underpinning that? What are the factors you need to be costing out in your organisation that demonstrate how much your culture is costing you? So again, just a few minutes on Mentimeter. This is a workshop we take into executives. We actually get them to work through, based on their feedback, how much it's costing. We get them to identify the key factors that are impacting on their culture. And it really starts to bring it home for them by actively involving them in that cost. So from your perspective, in your business, what are those factors that you need to calculate the cost of that are contributing to the cost of your existing culture?
So we've got Claire responding cost of leavers and subsequent recruitment costs, absenteeism levels.
Pre-COVID, it was the cost of recruitment, and no doubt it will be going forward, given the amount of people who are applying for jobs. The cost of recruitment's huge. Yeah,
we've got retention, development, long-term sickness absence, H and WB. I'm not sure what that is. H, health and well-being.
Health and well-being.
Disciplinaries, performance improvement plans, time. So whole agency costs, absolutely, if you're having to use agencies to recruit temporary or replacement staff. So a whole range of different costs if your culture is not supportive of the organisation and its objectives.
Thank you. So with some time and obviously pulling a group of people together, you'd be able to identify your own costs of the existing culture. And then as you build your programme, the cost of investment to work out the impact on your bottom line. And I think that's key. We need to be able to demonstrate impact. And that's something that is very important, and that will become apparent as we go through the presentation. So we're on to design the future. Hey, how far forward is that right now? Is that 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, a year, 5 years? Well, obviously, designing the future in a culture change pre-COVID would have been, hey, in 2 years' time, where do we want to be? What's our culture? What do we need to have in place about how we are working together and our whole behaviours, our employee experience that drives our customer experience. But you know what? We might not have that long. So I would like to identify, from your perspective, that clarity. So yes, a vision. Is it a vision for this week? Is your leader, are you all aware in your business about what's expected of you next week? Are you all aware of the successes? Are you all aware of the expectations, the challenges, and the priorities for this week? Because actually, that creates a culture. Just that knowledge, that understanding, everybody focusing in the same direction creates that togetherness culture, that cohesive growth culture, focusing on that same goal. So designing the future really is about creating that vision. And let's have this one I loved. This is 2014. Now, Sir Simon, he wasn't in 2014, he was Simon Stevens. Sir Simon came from Birmingham. So I don't know if anybody here knows related to him. He's now, and I think he was at the time here, Chief Executive of NHS Improvement. Wow, what a job he must have. But what a fantastic vision. A vision for the work they're doing. Think like a patient, act like a taxpayer. Now, if you can get your leaders with that absolute clarity of focus, our purpose, why do we exist, that everybody understands and really buys into, recruited to, wow, how powerful is that? So a great example for this was somebody who absolutely took that on board, embraced it, and brought down the blood tests for a cancer from 10 days down to 1 day. Now, if that was you waiting for that blood test, think like a patient, wow, what a difference that would have made. And think from a taxpayer's perspective, you know, the cost of stress, the time you might have had off work. And so just such a powerful, powerful vision. Here's one where with an IT team where I worked with the customer, I worked with their customers, I worked with their staff, really to unearth what was happening in there. It was not good. And the vision, this was the vision that was developed by the exec team and working in partnership. So the highlighted words are the values. These are the values we then threaded through. Deliver reliable and flexible. They couldn't get too excited in IT, reliable and flexible. I'm sure we could have done a lot better than that, but that was what's right for them at the time. Experience. They did to customers. They didn't understand what customers were or what they wanted. But the most important one here is this valued by all. And that was very much about me as an employee being valued, my team being valued, my department being valued, the us contributing value to the bottom line, and the business valuing us. So that one valued, really was a key to driving forward a lot of the culture change. So we took this into the whole IT department. We got them to work through what the behaviours were that underpinned each other. And then we got them working on it and setting up on it. And the outcome from this work was 47% improvement in poor performance and a 21% improvement in motivation over 6 months. Phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So culture change can have a huge impact, but you've got to be aware of where you're starting and how you're going to measure, and we'll cover that shortly. So remember that valued, because I'm going to get you to think about that shortly. So all the techniques we're sharing are by no means all the techniques that we have, but we're just trying to give you a taster as just to sort of help you to think through what does this look like for you and how might we create and support the culture through these difficult times. So in nurturing our early buds, there is so much in this, in growth. So here are the words that you use to describe your organization's current culture. Now, you wouldn't normally get such a spread of so many different words, but this in itself is a great way of identifying your starting point. This is a great way of bringing into the executive boardroom the reality of the culture, of the behaviors that are happening within their organization. So, I mean, I was blown away by these words. Fantastic, all of you. You're working in some great organizations. The word cloud, the bigger the words, the more frequently it was used. So inclusive, caring, collaborative, supportive, flexible. So when you get into the smaller words, so disempowering, risk averse, non-inclusive, disjointed, prescriptive. So this closed at 8 o'clock last night. I haven't had a lot of time to analyze it, but that would be a real eye-opener, taking into the boardroom the reality of the behaviours in their organisation. They don't talk, but how many of your executives talk behaviours? Have they ever talked behaviours to you? So even just putting the mirror in front of them. And in the days when we used to work in offices, I used to plaster the walls with the headlines. These were headlines when they walked into the room. So they were just, that whole environment was their culture. They were working in their culture. Very, very powerful. So I'm focusing here on leaders because I do think that that's where the biggest challenge is. If the leaders aren't doing it, they don't get it. And that's why the data is so important. So holding up the mirror, exposing reality, upskilling them to provide behavioural feedback, really key. But helping them understand the impact of their behaviours, perhaps through one of the profiles. We use DISC, we use 5 behaviours to great effect. Helping them understand the impact of their behaviour and how they need to adapt their style. A lot of people will undertake a behavioural profile and then use it as an excuse for why they behave that way. No, sorry, profile has completely failed. It's very much about for understanding how I need to adapt my behaviour to better relate to others. Very important is helping them explore their roles of values in their decision making. How do they play out, especially in times of crisis? What does this mean in how they bring their values to life and their culture survives through crisis? And make sure that each of the leaders actually sponsors a key initiative around this. They demonstrate their leadership. And the key to providing behavioural feedback not only is upskilling them, but giving permission across the whole organisation. If they're serious about this, then everyone in your business should be able to give anybody feedback about behaviour, as long as it's constructive and it's about helping that other person grow. So some really strong, powerful messages, really important to work with the executives. And if I'm not reporting, if one of our contracts isn't reporting to an exec, sorry, actually, do you know what? It's not going to work. I know it's not going to work because the execs are not buying into it. They're not even giving me time to listen, to work with me, to help them understand what it's about. So very strong messages is there in the leadership group. So how's the sprint going? Are you still with me? It's getting warmer and the sun is coming out. It's lovely, isn't it? So, oops, one back. So now we're going to cultivate our culture. What does that mean in reality? So again, it's coming back to the what and the how. The cultivation is all the things that we do to really embed that culture. What are all the things that we need to be focusing on? And I would suggest the most important one is setting very clear expectations. How many of you have got behaviours in your check-ins, your reviews that you have with staff? How many of your managers are comfortable in giving behavioural feedback? How many managers get feedback on their own behaviours? And how do we encourage people to dial up or dial down specific behaviours that can really make a significant difference? Because remember, our culture is the worst behaviour that the organisation accepts, and some of them can be pretty awful. So especially if you think about the inclusion culture, what's happening in your organisation? And when you have those core values, how are people being not encouraged, but expected to adapt their behaviour to be absolutely bringing those values to life through the whole employee experience, through to customer experience, because that's your brand. Your culture cannot be copied. It's your unique selling point. So cultivating that whole culture really can differentiate you from your competitors. And let's face it, that's going to be really key going forward. That differentiation, that unique selling point, it cannot be copied. So when it comes to culture change, cultivating the culture, just focusing on people isn't enough. Because unless you adapt your systems and processes, your technology and your processes, guess what? Nothing will really change. So let's look at an example for that. In terms of people, yep, we're doing a lot of focus on them. We're developing them. We're setting expectations around behaviors. Do you know what? We're going to set up agile methodology. How many of you have done that? Agile methodology. So really sort of a project methodology. They all come back, great new language, great training, all new processes in place. And then guess what? The agile, we need a budget, bang, they go into the system and the technology hasn't been adapted. The authorization process hasn't been adapted. And that whole behavior just falls flat because they're not able to really bring forward that agile methodology, that agile way of working. So it's very important to be working to understand, okay, so we're focusing on the culture, but where do our processes, where does our technology need to be adapted to really fit into those behaviors and support the behaviors that we now need to be using consistently across the organization. So remember I highlighted the valued as a value for one of the changes that we worked on. So consider a future culture where valued is identified as a core value, as we did. And from an employee perspective, in other words, I need to feel valued. For me to be able to grow and thrive along with the business and the organization, I need to feel valued. What are the key priorities that you need to think about in technology and processes that you need to focus on to achieve peak productivity? So for example, process, recruitment, recruit to your values. Technology, make sure that when we're doing our SIFT, if we're using AI, that actually that's adapted so we're shortlisting the right people. So just have a few moments and think about, okay, so we're going to introduce individual that everybody is valued in the organization so that they can add value. What do I need to be adapting in my technology, in my processes, in my organization? So again, contribute and chat, please. So, themes emerging. Diane, are you able to keep up with that? I can see there's lots of people contributing. Thank you.
The first one we had was from Debbie Hunt. I thought it was a really interesting one about regular feedback, both formal and informal. At the moment, of course, if we have people working remotely from home or half in the office, half at home, those feedback procedures, again, are a bit of a challenge, because if we're normally used to face-to-face one-to-ones, how comfortable do we feel about having feedback or giving feedback over a screen like this, whether that's both, well, perhaps more so we're happy with positive feedback, but where we're having to have difficult conversations, potentially tricky conversations. So I think that's a really interesting one. And Rhiannon's mentioned compassion. I know, Fiona, we've done training in the past about having tricky conversations, but with compassion. I think compassion's a really interesting one. And Sarah's talked about praise and recognition. Janita's talked about respect and being non-judgmental. Fiona's talked about performance management. So I think all those things where we're physically separated, we have to put more effort into alignment to achieve peak productivity than perhaps we had to when we were working together, co-located. So again, I think a lot of it reflecting the current challenges we have around the workspace at the moment.
Thank you, Diane. Of course, the appraisal is dead. How many of you are still doing appraisals? That check-in, that conversation we were talking about earlier, so people understand what the results are, what the performance is like, where our key challenges are, what our priorities are, and what that means to them in their role for this week. Really important for businesses who are pivoting at pace.
And I think
so. Yes,
those performance management type discussions are one of those things that can be squeezed out by the operational imperatives at the moment. Absolutely. It can almost be, it isn't necessarily seen as a nice to have, but there are just other much more pressing issues at the moment, and it's easy for those good practices to lapse.
So thank you again, all questions for you to take back into the workplace. So as we continue our sprint, I'm watching the clock. Harvesting the results. Now, I came from a retail background, and I suddenly ended up in in this whole dynamic of behavioral change, culture change. It was like, whoa, I know I've been really, really busy, but what have I achieved? And so very early on, I realized that the stark reality of really being clear, one, about what you're trying to achieve, and two, how do you measure it? And of course, it's that jelly. You're pinning that jelly on the wall. How on earth do you measure it? So measure your starting point and track and share your progress. So here is way I did one with an HR department, and the question I asked them at the beginning and at the end was, we have the culture in HR to role model and succeed to deliver strategy. That was their purpose. That was their objective for me, to help them. They needed to have the right culture to be leading on culture change. And working with them, that response increased by 70%. Now, how else can you measure culture change for execs to take notice? It has to be data driven. It could be on your employee engagement, but again, they're just going to focus on data, not on the reality of the behaviors. So how do you really demonstrate that added value that you're bringing into the business in terms of the culture and the impact it has on the bottom line? So very, very important. And when I worked with the executive team on 5 behaviors, the whole culture, this was preceding their culture change, helping them to work so much more effectively together. That was a 47% increase in their productivity. So again, you know, great results for me to be able to share with future clients. How do you let your exec team know how you're impacting on company performance? And that was with the executive who said, Fiona, this is not logical. So I knew I was up against a challenge there. So we're going right back to the beginning on the model, into the framework, which was survey the landscape. So where can you start from? And again, this is really for getting people's interest into culture change. We get it. How do we engage other people in it? So on our website, we've got the 7 significant signals, and this is copyright protected. So please this is for you to go on. It's free of charge, and you get a RAG report, and it's looking at that acronym around culture, the whole word of culture, based on measuring your performance and scoring your performance between 1 and 10. So to explore your company RAG rating, have a go. Have a look at 7 significant signals. Do it yourself, then invite the team in. Bring everybody's results into a meeting and explore. So what did you get for that? Was that a red or was that a green? Well, I thought it was a green because, well, actually I thought, no, I don't think so. I think it's a red, or actually. So it starts the conversation, because until people realize that this has bottom line impact, why would they bother? It's too pink and soft and fluffy. We really need to be able to demonstrate how culture absolutely is a key driver for growth in business. Growth for the people, the team, the results for their customers. So by all means, go online. It's free of charge. It's currently an individual assessment for bringing back in. Eventually, when we have the investment, we can go into bringing it into a team or a whole organizational change. But it's a diagnostic, and it's there for you to start using and share. What are you going to do as a result? What's the one thing you're inspired to do that have the biggest positive impact back at work? Because why have you invested your time? What are you going to take away? So I'm just going to get you to pause the button, leave you for a few minutes and think, okay, we did a sprint, that was fast. What have I learned? What can I take back into our workplace that will really help our business grow, our people grow, and our future ahead be thriving?
If you put your thoughts into chat, I'll make a note of them, and then we'll pick some of them up in conversation, I think, Fiona. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. So what are we seeing?
So we've got a couple around access to leadership. So Gemma talked about access to leadership, and Tracy's just put in about executive buy-in being a must. David's talked about the bottom line benefits of culture change and attending to it as an issue and it being worthy of discussion at the top table. What else have we got? Oh, this interesting one, Fiona, about the need to go back and revisit purpose and organisation values and check are they still valid in this COVID world that we're in. I think that's a really, really good point. Fiona and I are part of another organisation when we've been looking at how we reboot organisations. And one of the things there is are your values and your principles and your vision still fit for purpose? So I think that's a really, really good point. Claire's talked about the quotation around think like a patient, act like a taxpayer, the importance of aligning people to the vision, and that vision might have changed and you might have had to pivot totally during the last 6 months, or it might be just that it has to be tweaked, but nevertheless, perhaps formally taking some time to step back and ask the question, is our vision, are our values still fit for purpose? So that's co-op. Now we had one from Sarah. So your statement was what 3 words, question mark. Can you just talk about that a little bit more? What was was that a question or was it something to go away and think about? The what 3 words?
That was something to go away and think about.
Okay.
I think because actually the visual I found really useful, and we're doing a piece of work currently with our leadership team around learning environments, and it's a similar kind of process in terms of trying to understand and how we align our executive thinking and strategy with what's actually going on the ground.
Yes.
You know, so that for me, I thought, yeah, that, because as a visual, like you say, with the senior leadership team, it's always half a page, a visual, some data. It's that headline stuff, and you know, so I liked that approach.
So Sarah, what would be really important is a good way of doing that would be to get the executive team to answer that on one mentee and the rest of the organisation on another mentee.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very powerful.
Exactly. Yeah,
very powerful.
That's our plan going forward. We're running some focus groups with our exec team, and then we're planning to go down several layers of management and find out what they think operationally is actually happening. So
excellent, excellent. Yeah, the power of the visuals. Very, very good.
Sarah Taylor, you made the point about the need to align people, process and technology. Are you able to tell us a bit more about what that might mean for your organisation and how you might review that alignment?
That's me again. I don't know if there's another Sarah on there.
Sorry.
But that's because, you know, we can exist in isolation, and I think actually what happens is we go in and try to make some kind of big cultural change, but actually if the process and the IT and all that kind of stuff isn't there, then actually we're missing a huge trick. And we don't always join up the dots, I think, as an organisation, because actually, you know, it's much harder, I think, sometimes to think about process and, the technology infrastructure, who wants to play with that? But actually, if we don't play with that, then the behaviours we get will be the behaviours we get, because actually the technology and the process won't support any change.
Excellent. Yeah.
Absolutely. David, can I ask you to contribute? I read at the beginning your background within coaching, within manufacturing for enhanced productivity, and you made the point in the chat about bottom line benefits and it deserving a place at the top table, as it were. What's your experience around how much the people aspects of culture are recognised within organisations?
Yeah, I think people want to do that. You know, in calm moments, they see this. For me, this job is about a thriving company, and the people in it are absolutely important. But I think when it comes to it, the return on investment in a coaching program it doesn't give immediate benefit, and therefore can easily be. So this is important, but not right now. You know, I don't think people are saying it's not important, but it's just right now.
So hence your point about the bottom line benefits.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to give it's not a quick win kind of activity. What coaching belongs to the non-urgent activity, but it is highly important. So that those things can easily be pushed out.
Yeah. So I'm very conscious of time. We will go into the Q&A session shortly.